Director Patel, you're familiar with the Fifth Amendment.
Yes, Senator.
And it is really the freedom clause of the United States. So as I understood it, you testified yesterday that you'd like to have another $1 billion added on to the FY25 level to do the additional work you'd like to do on drug interdiction, fentanyl in general, and anti-terrorism. And today you gave us a budget that requests cutting $500 million. Which is it? It concerns me that you're not familiar with the core concept of due process applying to all persons as written in black and white in the Constitution. You haven't read the Constitution? It says all persons.
I've got it right here. But
that single exchange captured live on Capitol Hill is exactly why Senator Jeff Merkley's questioning of FBI Director Kash Patel went viral within hours. Right after Patel claimed familiarity with the Fifth Amendment, Merkley dropped the hammer. You haven't read the Constitution. It says all persons. I've got it right here. Patel left senators visibly stunned as he brushed off basic accountability questions about the Bureau's role in America's deportation crackdown. This wasn't just a gotcha moment, it exposed something far more disturbing.
I used to be, before I started doing everything, I was a public defender for years. I defended the worst humanity had to offer, including terrorists. And the one thing I learned in that job was, our due process and our Constitution applies to everyone, or it doesn't work. And that's exactly what our founding fathers wanted.
As the first former public defender ever to lead the FBI, Patel should be a champion of due process. Instead, he appeared evasive and unprepared, unwilling to clearly affirm that the Constitution's core protections apply to everyone on American soil, including hundreds of immigrants swept off the streets and rapidly deported to El Salvador's notorious CCOT megaprison without hearings. What exactly is happening inside the FBI under Patel's watch? How does the man sworn to defend the Constitution seem this unfamiliar with its most basic promise, and why does this constitutional amnesia strike at the precise moment hundreds of people are being stripped of their rights? The answers that followed only get more disturbing.
Senator Merkley.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Director Patel. And so as I understood it, you testified yesterday that you'd like to have another $1 billion added on to the FY25 level to do the additional work you'd like to do on drug interdiction, fentanyl in general, and anti-terrorism. And today you gave us a budget that requests cutting $500 million. Which is it? Do you want us to, what are you asking of this committee? To add funds, add $1 billion, or to cut $500 million?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate the opportunity. What I'm asking for is that with more, I can simply do more. And I was giving examples of what more I could do. I can do the mission and am in support of the budget here. And I'm working with appropriators and you to fill the gaps.
So you support the budget presented that cuts $500 million, but you also support us adding $1 billion should we choose to do that?
Well, I can't not support the budget as proposed because then I would be supporting no budget.
Okay.
This isn't the first time Kash Patel has displayed serious inconsistency before Congress. Just hours earlier, he aggressively demanded another $1 billion for drug interdiction and anti-terrorism efforts. Yet, when the official budget landed, it proposed cutting $500 million. Caught in this stunning flip-flop, Patel didn't give a straight answer. Instead, he claimed he can't not support whatever gets handed to him, because opposing it would mean supporting nothing at all. That's not leadership, that's a man trapped in his own contradictions, talking in circles. And this wasn't an isolated stumble. Senator Patty Murray slammed the FBI for failing to deliver its statutorily required FY25 spend plan to Congress over a week late, calling the delay really absurd. Basic deadlines and congressional back time, oversight apparently mean nothing to this director. But the real gut punch came when Merkley pressed harder. According to House Appropriations Committee releases, the administration's FY 2026 blueprint proposed slashing $545 million from the FBI. When asked point blank whether he wanted more money or less, Patel refused to commit. No clear number, no accountability. Just more vague talk about filling gaps. That same refusal to give straight answers on the budget is exactly the same attitude that defined everything that followed, especially when the Constitution itself was on the line.
Okay. Well, we've got those two options. We do look forward to further details from you about how you plan to modify the function of FBI on these different missions that you've highlighted today so that we can give it the appropriate consideration. Director Patel, you're familiar with the Fifth Amendment.
Yes, Senator.
And it is really the freedom clause of the United States. It was 4 years into being a nation when Congress and the states said, hey, we have to make sure that there's not an over-aggressive government in the future that deprives us of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And you're familiar that that applies to all persons in the United States.
Yes, Senator.
So there's been a lot of concern about the several hundred immigrants who were swept off the streets of America and sent to El Salvador without due process. And does that concern you?
Senator, I'm not in a position to comment on whether or not they were given or not given due process or are supposed to be afforded due process. All the FBI did and all the FBI will continue to do is arrest those that have violated the law.
Okay, but to arrest, you have to investigate. Have you launched an investigation of this violation of the Freedom Clause of the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, I don't know that I agree with your characterization.
Well, that was my first question, whether or not you agree with the Fifth Amendment and are prepared to defend it. It is your job to investigate crimes.
Yes, I agree with the Fifth Amendment. I agree with the entire Constitution, and the men and women at the FBI decide.
So are you going to launch an investigation of the reported violation of the due process of several hundred individuals?
Again, Senator, it's not for me to call the balls and strikes on it. The men and women at the FBI who are trained to open investigations will make those calls.
So you have no influence over whether an investigation is opened?
I have influence over it, but you're asking me a constitutional question. I'm not a constitutional scholar.
Well, it's actually not it's a question also of law.
But your position is that every one of those individuals is by constitutional right afforded due process. I don't know the answer to that. I'm telling you.
You haven't read the Constitution?
I've
It
got
says
it right,
all persons.
I've got it right here, but what you're saying is that every single one of the illegals that was sent down to El Salvador is supposed to be given due process pursuant.
Yeah, that's what the Constitution says. It says
doesn't
no person.
say that.
It does say no person.
What Kash Patel revealed in that hearing goes far beyond one awkward exchange. It exposes a deliberate and dangerous narrowing of constitutional protections at the very top of American law enforcement.
I am honored to be here in support of Donald J. Trump. He is being victimized, but we as a country are being victimized even more by the unconstitutional weaponization of justice and the two-tier system of justice that is on full display.
Patel wasn't simply declining to comment on an ongoing matter. He explicitly told a United States senator that he didn't know whether the Fifth Amendment applies to the hundreds of immigrants swept off American streets and sent to El Salvador's notorious CCOT mega prison without individual hearings. The Fifth Amendment does not limit due process to citizens. For over a century, the Supreme Court has repeatedly affirmed that the phrase, any person in the Bill of Rights, applies to every human being on U.S. soil, citizens and non-citizens alike. From Yickwo v. Hopkins in 1886 through Reno v. U., Flores and beyond, the law has been crystal clear. The government cannot simply grab people off the street, strip them of liberty, and ship them to a foreign prison without any process. Yet Patel's evasive answers effectively treated due process as optional when the targets are immigrants. As the first former public defender to lead the FBI, Patel should be its strongest champion of these rights. Instead, by refusing to acknowledge the FBI's role in investigating potential constitutional violations by other agencies, he is carving out a massive exemption. This isn't theoretical. Reports have documented cases where individuals with valid asylum claims, pending court dates, or even U.S. citizen family members were caught in these operations, including the high-profile wrongful deportation of Maryland resident Kilmar Abrego Garcia under the revived Alien Enemies Act of 1798, a case that required Supreme Court intervention. When the nation's top law enforcement officer treats the Constitution's most basic safeguard as negotiable, it sends a chilling signal to every other government agency. Constitutional corners can be cut as long as the political target is unpopular. That is precisely how precedents for abuse are quietly built, one refusal to investigate at a time. And with Patel still having months, possibly years, left in the job, every American should be asking, How much further will this go?
Person. Yeah, I'll encourage you to read it, because it's also
read it
been
every day.
affirmed by the Supreme Court repeatedly. In the case of Miranda versus Arizona, held the right of all individuals, regardless of citizenship status. The Supreme Court in Reno versus Flores. I mean, but it's the plain language of the Constitution. It concerns me that you're not familiar with the core concept of due process applying to all persons as written in black and white in the Constitution.
As the first public defender who's ever served at the FBI as its director, I am more aware of due process than any predecessor in my seat. You are delineating between removal proceedings and criminal acts. My job is to investigate criminal acts. That's what we do.
You are aware that the Fifth Amendment refers to taking away liberty, and when people are arrested on the street, detained and sent out of the country, that their liberty has been taken away.
Senator, that is a constitutional question that you are asking me to answer. It's not for me to answer.
The question has already been answered by the Supreme Court that they're protected, therefore it's a violation of law, and it's your responsibility to open an investigation, and you're saying today you will not do so?
I am not the agency involved in removal proceedings. That is a different branch of government.
So if an agency other than the FBI violates the law and the Constitution, you will not investigate because it's a different agency?
I will investigate every violation of law.
Well, you have, but you just said you're not investigating.
No, you and I are in disagreement on what is a violation of law. I have yet to hear from the Supreme Court your position as you have adjudicated it.
Well, very, very interesting, because the Supreme Court's been very clear, and I had heard you were trained in the law, so I expected maybe you would try to uphold it. You also took an oath to the Constitution.
Thank you for the reminder.
Well, it's important to remind you, since you're apparently unfamiliar with the very basics of the core protection of freedom in our Constitution.
What I am familiar with is protecting the American public, and that's what
Let me close with one question, Mr. Chairman. Will you make sure that due process in every action of the FBI is completely honored under your time as director?
Will I ensure that due process is followed?
Yes.
Under the Constitution?
Completely. Send that message throughout the FBI that due process must be followed, is constitutionally required. Make sure that it's done under your direction.
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
This hearing between Senator Jeff Merkley and FBI Director Kash Patel did more than expose one difficult exchange. It revealed a deeper misalignment between the person leading America's premier law enforcement agency and the constitutional principles that agency exists to protect. Patel's defense followed a familiar pattern seen across multiple high-profile appearances this year. He first asserted superior awareness of due process compared to any previous director, then shifted responsibility by describing the deportations as simply